Welcome back. This is Tucker. Let's talk weather. Severe weather remains a big part of our forecast, but things are beginning to change. We're looking at a massive shift in the jet stream and talking about the impacts it will have on your weather. What's up, guys? Good to see you here. Hopefully you've had a nice weekend. We have some big changes in the forecast, but right now some active weather is still continuing. You can see all these clouds here in the central U.S., we're going to see severe storms reach the southeastern U.S. here too. But at the same time, in the west, there is a big change going on right now, and this will have a huge ripple effect across the rest of the country as we get into the rest of the week. So let's dive in and let you know what's coming up. We're starting with a look at our severe weather threats, and then we're getting into that really big pattern shift that's going to take over as we get to the middle of this week. But I'm going to show you here as we record this on Sunday, we have level 3 risks across Texas, Oklahoma, and portions of the southeast here. Generally speaking, we're looking at a wind and hail threat. This is a little more widespread, but this is going to be one that takes us into the night and even into the morning on Monday. Speaking of Monday, that severe weather shift isn't very significant. We still see it in many of the same areas. And once again, we're looking at primarily a wind and hail threat. Basically, what's going to happen is you're going to have individual storms pop up early in the day, and they're going to form into clusters and lines. When you have those individual storms, you have a larger hail threat. When you get those clusters and lines, it becomes more of a wind threat. Level 2 risk here in Texas and into parts of the southeast. Then moving into Tuesday, still just seeing this storm threat shift slowly to the south. We have a slow-moving front that's essentially moving south just a little bit more every single day, and that's why our storms are too. We have this level 1 risk across the southeast and across Texas. There will be some areas that develop with level 2 sort of risk level. It just depends on exactly how these smaller scale things work out, but still, chance for some wind and hail mixed in here across the same areas. Let's get to the timing on the storms, and then we'll get into that big pattern shift I keep talking about. Starting off here on Sunday, our severe storms, you can see kind of ongoing here across a good chunk of the central and southeastern U.S., and you're going to see these clusters develop as we get later into the days. This is late Sunday, and there are your clusters showing up. Also, a lot of these storms will be continuing overnight, so these aren't just sort of your afternoon storm threats. These will be kind of 24/7 or 72/3, if you will, if that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And what we're looking at here is our threat moving into Monday. This is Monday morning, and as we get into the afternoon, again, you see more of those clusters start to form. Many of the same locations here, so this is our second day with storms and some severe weather. Not all of these storms will be severe, but there will be certainly some severe segments, especially with the damaging wind threat. And as we move into your Tuesday morning, we see things begin to slow down a bit, and then we get into the day Tuesday, more activity. Certainly this is going to be less scattered than the previous days, but it will be present in many of the same areas as we were talking about. Good chunk of the southeast and the far south central. Also, moving into Wednesday, you're going to see a storm system take all that leftover energy, and here it is moving by the Great Lakes. We're going to talk more about this as it really ties into the overall pattern change, and it is time to get into that right now. By the way, guys, let me know where you're watching from. I love to hear who's on here. I love interacting with you guys. If you have any questions, I'll answer all of them in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. I'm a meteorologist. You'll always get my genuine forecast opinions right here. The upper levels of the atmosphere are hugely important to the weather that we experience on the ground, especially when making a forecast more than just a couple days out. So I'm going to explain what I'm seeing on this map here, which shows us those upper levels. We're going to focus on the US, which you can see right in the middle of the map, and I'm moving this into the middle of this week, which is where our pattern really begins to change. Here we are on Wednesday. What we're seeing is a ridge here. That's an area of high pressure through a big chunk of the atmosphere begin to form in the western US and western Canada. We also have this actually closed off storm system here. That's that rain that you're going to see near the Great Lakes, and that's going to take its time moving around. When storm systems get closed off, they don't get pushed by the jet stream as easily. Moving this forward further, that ridge in the west, you're really going to see it strengthen, and it's going to basically take over the western US here as we end the month of May and even begin the month of June. So this is going to be a huge player in our weather. Meanwhile, that closed off storm system, it ends up becoming a trough, which you can see here. And troughs are basically areas of low pressure, colder weather, generally gray and stormy conditions. So if you're in the east, as we get to the end of May, I'm not saying there's going to be severe weather. In fact, I don't expect that, but there will be some storms, some cloudy days, some rainy days too. In the west, we have this area of high pressure. That's going to be keeping us warm, dry, and generally on the warm side as well. We're going to see this pattern continue into the start of May here too, eventually breaking down. And once we get to after about June 2nd, we see the pattern break down. That ridge fades and moves east. But there is one big piece of this too, and that one big piece has to do with the jet stream. I'm going to put this in motion here. Our jet stream are those blue and purple colors, those pink colors as well, where it's strong. And what we see here as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, the end of May here, is not so much. In fact, what we're looking at is a jet stream that is squirming around the ridge. When you get ridges in the west and you get troughs in the east, your jet stream tends to follow that ridge out of the U.S. and will sometimes sink into the U.S. here on the eastern side, but this cutoff low is messing everything up. It's slowing down the jet stream, and so is this one too. Basically preventing it from really taking shape and moving systems along. So we actually saw this earlier in the month where a couple storm systems lingered for some time and kept some bad weather days in play. That's going to be the same thing here. However, there's a catch. As we continue to move this into the start of June, what you're noticing first off is, again, our jet stream kind of squirming around without a really great shape here, but more importantly, when you have a ridge in the west, you don't get your jet stream to cut northwards across the U.S. It kind of dives south. See what I'm seeing here? And when your jet stream doesn't cut northwards through the U.S., severe weather is greatly limited. So this is actually good news, unless you're me and storm chasing this upcoming week. But it's good news because we're not going to see many storms, is what I see in the forecast. In fact, I see a pretty long quiet period here, beginning around May, we'll call it 28th, and continuing into about June 3rd. And of course, like I said, I'm storm chasing actually May 28th to June 5th, but we'll still see some stuff. This is where the pattern changes though. June 3rd, you can see the jet stream, we're changing its shape back again. There's a dip into the United States. You can see we're likely to get some severe storms to return by June 3rd, and likely we're going to see this continue, at least this severe weather threat. June 3rd, I'm seeing June 4th here. June 5th is in play. June 6th is in play. June 7th. So once we get past those first few days of June, our jet stream reverts to being a little bit more active again, but do expect this quiet period with implications on temperatures here too. We'll keep this part a little more brief, but basically what we're looking at are temperature anomalies. Orange colors indicating warmer than average weather, blue colors indicating colder than average weather. As we get into Wednesday and the later part of the week, it's going to be pretty warm in the western U.S., but really just the Rocky Mountains and farther west. Meanwhile, the central and eastern U.S. generally will be colder while those storm systems are in play. You can see here, though, as we get into early June, things begin to shift, and that's where our weather gets more active once again. And while I wouldn't put too much stock into this yet, I'll show you a futurecast just so you can see what we're looking at here. This is Wednesday. There's our storm system near the Great Lakes. Watch as it brings some rain and showers persistently to the east central U.S. and the east coast. The western U.S., meanwhile, pretty dry, maybe a weak system or two coming off the Pacific, but generally speaking, not a lot of activity unless you're in the eastern U.S. here through the end of May and into the start of June. But as we get into those middle days of June, there's our next storm system forming as the jet stream takes shape once again. And this is where we're going to see our fronts line up and our potential for severe weather as this storm system here begins to develop. So we're giving you a long look out in the future, but I'm telling you with pretty good confidence, our weather is going to be quite nice and quiet, at least if you are near and west of the Mississippi, moving through the last several days of May and the beginning of June. And that's about all I got for you today. Be sure to check back though, because like I said, I'm storm chasing May 28th through June 5th. Although the pattern looks quiet, I do have a pretty good knack for finding things when there isn't a lot ongoing. So you'll want to check back. I'll be posting updates on shorts and all that stuff. And in the meantime, stay safe if severe weather's impacting you. And I hope you have a great Memorial Day and end to your May.